in Fallujah. He was knocked out when a rocket-propelled grenade hit his Humvee. When he came to, he saw that both his hands were gone, and his leg was badly wounded. He couldn't fire his weapon. He could barely move, and he was bleeding to death. But he had the strength of mind to lead the men under his command, and that is exactly what he did. He kept them calm. He showed them how to stop the bleeding in his leg and told them where to return fire. He had them call for support, and he got them out of there alive. His composure under fire that day earned him the Bronze Star with Valor device. But if you ask him, what did you get it for? He'll tell you, just for doing my job. After a long recovery, Eddie continued to serve as a martial arts instructor. He resigned from his beloved Marine Corps a few years ago, but he still lives by the motto, once a Marine, always a Marine. And if you want to see the American spirit of never retreating, no matter the odds, of steady confidence and optimism, no matter the setbacks, look at Eddie's story. No matter how tough times are, Americans always pull through. As Eddie put it himself, we don't really foster the attitude of I can't. When you have an obstacle in front of you, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and focus on what you can. So please join me in honoring retired Marine Sergeant James Eddie Wright. He was an Air Force squadron commander in a combat pilot who had flown over 150 missions in Korea and Vietnam. One day on routine mission over Hanoi, his plane was shot down. He spent the next 5.5 years in that living hell known as the Hanoi Hilton. Like his fellow prisoners, Tom endured the beatings, the torture, the hunger, the years of isolation. He described it saying, there was nothing to do, nothing to read, nothing to write. You had to just sit there in absolute boredom, loneliness, frustration, and fear. You had to live one day at a time because you had no idea how long you were going to be there. After 2 years of solitary confinement, pacing back and forth in his cell, 3.5 steps across, 3.5 steps deep, Tom was finally moved to a larger holding cell with 45 other Americans, these prisoners. Among them was a man named John McCain. In circumstances that defy description, this band of brothers, they kept each other alive, and one by one, they came home. Tom was released on March 14th, 1973. You might think that a man who had suffered so much for his country would be bitter and broken by it. But Tom's heart was only filled with love. Love for America, that special love of country that we call patriotism. For many, a corny thing. For me, it is more important now than at any time in my life. How wonderful it is to be an American, to come home. Friends, please join me in honoring retired Air Force Colonel Tom Kirk. men here today face terrible sufferings, overwhelming setbacks, and impossible odds. And they endured, and their stories are America's stories. We will always come through. We will never give up, and we shall endure, because we live by that moral strength that we call grace. Because though we've often skirted the precipice, a providential hand has always guided us to a better future. And I know that many of us today, we are worried about what we face. Sometimes our challenges, they just seem insurmountable. But here together, at the crossroads of our history, may this day be the change point. Look around you, you're not alone. You are America. You have the same skill, spine, and the moral courage of Washington and Lincoln and Martin Luther King. It is in you, it will sustain you as it sustained them. So with pride in the red, white, and blue, with gratitude to our men and women in uniform, let's stand together, let's stand with honor, let's restore America.
It is no longer enough in our country just to look at these brave heroes. They cannot be the only ones that do the tough things. We as individuals, if we want our country to survive, we must begin now to look at our own selves. We must be individuals of faith, individuals of hope, and individuals of charity. When I first put this together in my head, I thought it was supposed to be political, and I had to announce it for some reason. I went down to Florida, and I just felt I had to look people in the eye and tell them what we were doing. 25,000 people showed up, and I looked them in the eye, and I immediately broke out into a cold sweat. And when I got off, we were surrounded by a crowd. It was in the round, and people were screaming and yelling, and hands were coming from everywhere, and I grabbed my assistant by the lapels, and I pulled him in close. And I screamed in his ear, I said, "I don't know how, but we're wrong." He pushed me back and said, "What?" I knew we were supposed to come here. So I went back to the drawing board. And over the holidays, I painted the faith, hope, and charity. Those three icons. I brought them back to the television studio, and I said, "This is our direction next year." And they looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "I can't explain it either. I don't understand it, but this is where we're going." It was about 4 months ago that we were still kind of lost, and we didn't know what we were going to do when we got here. And I was down on my knees, and we were in the office, and I said,